Can a pilot really pay to the maximum when it loads with such a deep personal duel and at the same time fights with a car that does not respond in the most demanding curves of the calendar? Today we tell you why Singapore's GP can be the biggest challenge in Lewis Hamilton's modern career. Lewis Hamilton has faced countless challenges throughout his career. Controversial decisions in boxes, accidents at high speed, internal struggles within their equipment, global media pressure, radical technical changes, and historical battles by world championships. But nothing had prepared for this. To face a grand prize in the midst of such a raw, as intimate, as devastating personal loss as he lived days before reaching Singapore. Roscoe, his inseparable English bulldog, was not just a pet. It was his life partner, a constant in the paddocks for more than a decade. Present on trips, in hotels, in boxes, in good days, and in bad days. It was an emotional refuge, a symbol of peace in the middle of the deafening noise of Formula One. For fans, it was already part of the visual folklore of each weekend, Roscoe walking with style through the paddocks, with sunglasses, even with their own Instagram account. But for Lewis, it was much more. It was family. The severity of this loss is not anecdotal. The emotional affectation was such that Hamilton canceled official commitments with Ferrari, including a Pirelli tire test, and was absent from an important event at Milan's fashion house. On September 28th, the day Roscoe died, Hamilton wrote one of the most personal publications of his career, confessing that he had to make the most difficult decision of his life. Roscoe had been fighting for 4 days in intensive care, connected to life support, victim of relentless pneumonia. And Hamilton did not want to separate from him until the last moment. All this happens just before one of the weekends more physically and mentally demanding of the entire calendar, the Singapore Grand Prix. An urban circuit full of closed curves, areas of very high concentration and strategic tension. There are no error margins. There are no generous escapes. Here, each failure is paid. Singapore is not just another career. It is the most raw emotional test that Hamilton has had to face since his arrival at Formula One. And although his story has shown that he's able to channel the pain in performance, as in 2007 after losing the championship for a point, or in 2018 when he won in Germany after a week plagued with criticism, this time is different. This time the pain does not come from the paddock or external pressure. It comes from home, of that private space that, until now, had always been its source of balance. In the past, its ability to transform pain into motivation has been almost legendary. But now, at 40, in a new team, with a still problematic car, and such a personal loss still, without digesting, the unknown is total. The problem comes from the system design itself. It was a Ferrari attempt to please two opposite styles, that of Charles Leclerc, which prefers a direct and progressive direction, and that of Carlos Sainz, which favors a more linear and soft response. The result was a badly calibrated hybrid, which ended not satisfying any, and now, in Hamilton, it becomes a technical nightmare that in high-speed curves, the SF-25 does not respond as it should. Feedback is late, as if the direction was disconnected from reality, until the car is already at the limit. It is a feeling that dislodges, which prevents building back trust after return. And although Singapore is not a traditional high-speed circuit such as Silverstone or Spa, Marina Bay's technical demand imposes its own challenge. Closed curves, combined braking and changes of direction under pressure. In that context, not having an address that communicates precisely is a lost time sentence. In Singapore, a few tenths can be the difference between the podium or exit 10th. But the problems do not end there. The second great obstacle that Hamilton drags is the adaptation to the Brembo brakes that Ferrari has used for years. For him, it is a paradigm shift. After more than a decade in Mercedes using carbon industry brakes, the touch of the pedal, the optimal pressure, the way the car reacts in braking, all that changed suddenly, and the result has been unpredictable. Hamilton has described that transition as a lottery. Sometimes the car responds as expected. Others simply don't stop as it should. This directly affects its driving style, which is based on stopping late, maintaining a stable minimum speed and curve, and leaving maximum traction. If the braking point is not consistent, your style simply cannot work. And there is a detail that further aggravates this equation: the wear of the brakes. Ferrari has had recurring problems in high-temperature races where the cooling system fails to keep the discs in its optimal thermal range. In Singapore, a night race, that threat does not disappear. In fact, it is transformed. The heat accumulated in the area, moisture and lack of natural wind make the car accumulate temperature progressively. If the brakes overheat in the midst of traffic, the loss of performance is immediate and devastating. Singapore does not forgive strategic errors. Safety car's probability is very high. Stop windows are narrow. And most importantly, the track position is queen. Here, advancing is a luxury that is bought with a lot of battery, with mechanical risk, and with surgical precision. A bad calculation in boxes, a second delay, or even a wrong interpretation of the behavior of the tires can mean falling 5 or 6 positions without the possibility of tracing. And there is another key factor: heat. Marina Bay is not just a technical circuit, it is a physical and thermal test. Temperatures, although the race is disputed at night, are still high. The tires suffer, the brakes suffer, and the monoplace's cooling systems are put to the limit. If Ferrari's strategy does not take these factors in real time, it is inevitable that thermal management problems arise that compromise performance in recent laps, just when the differences between pilots are minimized. The problem is not only technical or logistics, it is philosophical. Ferrari seems to be still finding his identity under pressure. For years, the team was criticized for its strategic hesitation, its late decisions, and its lack of tactical aggressiveness. With the arrival of Fred Vasseur and the incorporation of weight figures in the technical area, a structural change was expected. But the first great prizes of 2025 have shown that the transformation process is not even close to completing. This has added a psychological element that cannot be underestimated. Marina Bay is a night race, and that changes everything. Change the way of working in boxes, visibility, traffic management on the track, and the thermal behavior of the components. Ferrari has to adapt its planning to an environment that requires 100% operating under unconventional conditions. It is the type of weekend that separates the teams that execute with mastery from those who simply react. In this context, Hamilton's role becomes even more complex. Because not only should the limitations of the car, but also anticipate the failures of a team that still do not master its own operation with its talent. The pilot not only runs, also read, interpret, communicate, and sometimes direct from inside the car. That is why Singapore will not just a speed test. It will be an integration test. Perfect communication between pilot and wall. And until now, Ferrari has shown more doubts than certainties. What is at stake for Lewis Hamilton in Singapore goes beyond points, classifications, or statistics. It goes beyond the timetables or what onboard cameras say. At this time of his career, at 40, in a completely new environment, and with a recent emotional loss that shakes him to the foundations, the true question that remains cannot be answered with data. The question is that unwavering spark that made it a legend still inside Hamilton? At other times of his career, adversity was his engine. It grew at the pressure. He reinvented himself after the defeats. But now he faces a different storm. Its battle tool, the SF-25, is unstable. His team, Ferrari, continues to learn strategically in an era where the milliseconds no longer forgive. And personally, his heart is fractured. The emptiness left by Roscoe is not filled with podiums or trophies. It takes inside in silence, in each respite before going on track, in each moment of concentration, in each decision taken at 300 kilometers per hour with the thoughts still fogged by the duel. All this is condensed in a single circuit. Marina Bay, Singapore, the urban labyrinth where only the strongest mentally survive, where there is no room to doubt, where each wall is closer to what it seems, where fatigue is not only physical but emotional, and where the night does not bring rest but pressure illuminated by spotlights and eyes that do not blink. Hamilton comes here not as the favorite or as the man to beat, but as the greatest question of the season. And that is what makes this career so fascinating. Because if there is someone capable of taking all that complexity, the emotional, technique, strategic, and turning it into an unforgettable performance, it is him. But it is also true that I had never been so to the limit, that he had never charged with so many fronts open at the same time. A car that does not respond, a team that is not yet yours, a personal pain that weighs more than any helmet, and a circuit that demands absolute perfection. The question is not whether Lewis Hamilton can win in Singapore. The question is whether Singapore will be the turning point or the blow of reality. If this will be the time when we see a champion rewriting his legacy or a man facing, for the first time, his true limits. And that question can only be answered when the night falls in Marina Bay, when the traffic light and silence in the cockpit are absolute. There, without words, without excuses, without margin, Hamilton will have to answer it with all it has, its piloting. Now that you know the complete panorama, it touches you. Because beyond what the stopwatch says, there is something that can only be interpreted from the perspective of the attentive fan, which follows every detail of which he feels this season is more than another edition of the championship. What do you think we will see in Singapore? A Hamilton that turns pain into speed, which finds the light of Marina Bay the light he needs to light his new stage with Ferrari. Or will we witness a more human, more vulnerable, more exposed version of a pilot who, for the first time in many years, seems to be sailing without a compass?